Please don't believe men who are trying to scare women into marriage, especially not men like this guy. This is part 2 of the real reason why women are single. In the last video, and please click the comment to go back and watch all that, I went into this article that just came out in the New York Times where she just goes into all the real reasons why. And if we listen to women's lived experiences, we would know why they're not getting married. But instead, we keep seeing columnists, pundits, and this guy who has zero qualifications to be talking about this. Like, finances is his world, but somehow we're supposed to trust what he says about the lonely male crisis and how women should just get married to men because they're violent and dangerous when they're single. So let's marry these men that are violent and dangerous so they can ruin our lives or even take our lives. Okay. But before I get into this dude and how his arguments are actually very much rooted in white supremacy culture, eugenics, anti-blackness, and obviously like patriarchy and misogyny, I want to hit on a couple other things first. Despite this being the narrative right here, I mean, that women are just trusting men, we're begging them to marry us. And, you know, it has worked. It has worked. So many women will just stay with a man for 10, 15, 20 years till he finally gives her the ring. And then he smashes her face with cake at the wedding to humiliate her for making him do something he never wanted to do. But he knows that she benefits his life so much he has to do it. Remember, like I said yesterday, all the things that they promised us that marriage brings us, it doesn't actually bring us. You don't even get security of like not being able to use, rubber with your husband because you're just as likely to get an STI from them. They also will sabotage our careers at every opportunity. Not all of them. My career has thrived since I got with my husband. If a man is not benefiting your life and making it easier and better, he's going to make it worse because of the power structures of patriarchy. Because a lot of men don't actually like their wives. They just like what they do for them. Anyway, remind me to get into this one later on. This man, even when his wife wrote a book on her lunch break, he was pissed. How dare her do something amazing, and becomes very successful in the 30 minutes of the day that she has without having to deal with him. We also know that men are 6 times more likely to leave us if we get a terminal illness. We also get stuck taking care of our husband's parents in addition to our own. Oh, and y'all know I talk about this all the time. Our husbands also convince us to do really crazy things, like go hiking during the hottest days of the year, and then we die. Or they go out and do crazy things without us, not giving a crap if they almost die, and they want us to just hold down the fort and raise their kids and put us through hell. And something I really want people to talk more about is that if men are not even abusive, at the very bare minimum are exploiting us, they also will slowly unalive us through their weaponized moodiness, have so much fun outside, and as soon as they get home, they're in a stick in the mud, and everyone's got to walk on eggshells around daddy. And then we also don't sleep well because they have things like sleep apnea and they snore and they wake us up all night but won't go to another room or sleep on the couch. And so we lose years of sleep, and men sleep better with us. Decades of sleep deprivation will take years off of your life. And yet men like this dude have the audacity to continue to write crap like this, threatening us. Don't focus on your career, you silly girls. It's marriage that will provide you all the security and happiness you need. You're right. Most of the things that we hear about in terms of dating is written by men, especially white men, cishet white men. One of my favorite ones, and I'm going to do a whole video on this, remind me if I forget, the love languages. You know who wrote that? I'm not saying that there's no validity to love language. We really got to check our sources of where are these theories coming from. The lonely male crisis is really consequences of your own actions, not our problem to solve. Go fix yourself, men. The 5 love languages was written by a Baptist pastor from the South. This dude has convinced all of us that, I mean, honestly, let's talk about it. Most men will say their love language is schmex. And his book is more about you're supposed to think about your partner's love language, not your own. If we want them to feel the love we are trying to communicate, we must express it in their primary love language, which for men conveniently happens to be schmegs. Do you see a little bit of coercion happening here, y'all? You don't truly love your husband if you're not communicating in his love language. Now, what may come as a shock to no one, a southern white cishet man from the Baptist church also happens to have a lot of racist and homophobic anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, openly encourages discrimination against that community. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, he wrote a whole book, Winning the Race to Unity, where, reverse racism is really at the root of everything. This I encourage you to Google this. The message behind this is so racist. I have not read this book. I never will. But even reading passages of it to do research for this video was horrifying. But also like not at all surprising. Oh, he's also buddies with Focus on the Family. We know what that's about. Also doesn't seem the least bit concerned with women's love languages, really. It doesn't apply the same mindset for women's physical touch love language. If you know what I mean? Like, God! And everybody knows the 5 love languages. This man got that out into the whole world. My friends in France talk about it. You know what I mean? This white man in the South has a worldwide reach. And the whole premise is to get women to fork their husbands more because that's their love language. And let's get back to that bald dude. He's such an expert who seems to have never really done any work on himself. His father had been married and divorced, to the best of my knowledge, 4 times. He divorced his last wife at the age of 89, just 1 year before she passed away from Parkinson's. This is this man's role model. Literally, his own father proved the point that men leave women on their deathbed. Couldn't hang out 1 more year. Nope, gotta find someone else. Bye-bye. 89, he left her. His dad also had a terrible relationship with money, so he left. And Scott was raised by his mom, who had to work her butt off because her ex was a loser. He didn't have money, and it was very emasculating. And then I joined a frat and started working out, and then women loved me. So now I should be the person that men listen to. A man who wants to be the most influential thought leader in the history of business. Are you narcissism? I mean, he's worried about his narcissism getting the best of him. He's the progressive Jordan Peterson. And he's the one, other than like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson, that men are listening to. I don't have time to go into all of this in this one video because it's so deep and it covers such a large history. But basically, obsession with women getting married, in particular white women, and white women having children is absolutely rooted in eugenics, white supremacy, anti-blackness, and white women have been peddling this too. And this is one reason why white women feminists are not trusted. It's because, like a lot of men, white women in the progressive era started peddling this thing that the schmegs differences between males and females were the product of racial progress. White women saw themselves as the matriarchy of the indigenous people. So they're behind the boarding schools. And like everything bad, white women are tied into it. It wasn't just white men doing this. And this book was like life-changing for me because I was a history major at the University of Montana, but I grew up in the South. Didn't understand my family. I didn't understand my culture. I didn't understand what my history was because I've been lied to because the daughters of the Confederacy literally rewrote history and got those books out into schools, and that's what I learned. So when I went to college and changed my major to history and started focusing on women's history, basically a history of human rights, but especially like in the US, oh my God, this is when I realized I have so much to learn. I spent my entire senior year of college writing my thesis, which originally was, the women's suffrage movement, and quickly turned into racism and white supremacy within the women's suffrage movement because this one book opened my eyes to, oh my God, this little Charlotte Perkins Gilman here was one of the many women, but she was like, rah! She was tired of being at home. So she challenged the more like Victorian way of looking at the schmegsual differences, right? It's like, wait, I don't want to be in the home. I want a public life. I want to, vote. So instead, focused on the difference between white women and Black, Indigenous, and other women of color, but especially Black women. White feminists rewrote sexual differences, a tool of sexism, as proof of white supremacy. That white women would be the messengers of civilization. They literally reinforced patriarchy instead of fighting it. Patriarchy was necessary for the advancement of primitive women. Black, Indigenous, and other racialized women are not seen as ready for feminism because they first had to demonstrate they were true women. And as someone who grew up in the South, I very much saw around me that the lily white female was pushed pretty hard. This all started to make so much sense. By buying into this binary of like feminine and masculine, but directly linking it to racism, they basically set themselves up. The public figures' goal was to like save the race. White women repurposed the schmegs binary for our own ends. I mean, this thing was huge when I was a kid. This is more of the same. That Scott guy constantly talks about declining birth rates. Who do you think they're worried about? Every time you hear family values, lonely men, this obsession with trad wife, and these binary, just know the root of that is white supremacy culture. Don't buy into it. If you want to know more about this, this book was really academic and kind of groundbreaking for its time, but there's so many other books that do even better job of connecting all these dots. This is just a few. I'm not an expert in any of this, just sharing what I've learned. Let me know if you want more.